So I feel very privileged to be surrounded by so many wonderful composers from many countries. And I think we also have among us the ladies, the directors from Radio Bucharest. They're not here anymore? Well, anyway. So we can start having some conversations and, I don't know, evocations about what we heard. And I don't know if anybody has questions. I certainly have some questions as a performer. And perhaps I should ask Phil Cashian first, because he is an outsider in a way. I mean, he did have the scores from me, but he's not like us. He didn't, rehearse or debated the music. And I don't know if I could ask you, I mean, with your experience, seeing these and hearing these explanations and these 4 pieces of music, where would you place them in the compositional scene? Or how do you look at them?
What a question.
Or, I mean, it would interest us as instrumentalists as well, as I'm sure it would interest the composers.
Well, before answering that question, or maybe not answering that question, I just want to say it's really interesting to hear 4 very, very different composers. It's always interesting to hear different composers' music performed side by side, especially when they're talking about the music before we hear them. But to hear 4 very different composers writing for the same combination, pretty much the same combination of instruments, is fascinating because you're all approaching the same. I was going to say problem, but that's probably the wrong word. Approaching the same, or writing for the same lineup. So you're working with the same sort of materials. So I thought it was really, really interesting to hear you all talk about your pieces in a very kind of theoretical, sort of holistic kind of way. I really don't like sort of labelling composers and saying where I think they fit into the scheme of things. I don't think that's a composers should worry about that. That's for critics and musicologists, if we care what they have to say. But I'd like to ask the 4 composers is, having heard all this very interesting theoretical sort of background to the pieces, I'd like to ask you where the notes come from. Carmen, do you want to tell us where the notes come from? For this piece particularly. How did you start this piece? What's the very first thing that you did?
This is a secret, but...
No secrets allowed.
No, in my composing, I come sometimes or periodically back towards, let's say, some other earlier compositions of mine.
Right.
And, for example, this piece relates on an earlier piece which was composed for voices. But this is not the only one, so I think it's the third maybe, that is like, in a way, a variation of the older mother piece.
Is it a memory of that piece, or are you literally taking material from it?
No, it's not a memory, no, because otherwise, memories are imprecise, no.
Which could be an interesting thing for a composer.
Yeah.
Imprecision.
Oh, I think my music is imprecise enough. I work with
it. Seems very precise looking at the score.
Yes,
it seems absolutely
but the result,
immaculate.
I think I appreciate on my own music that there is a discrepancy between, let's say, the very ordered aspect of the score and the final result, which interests me in being, in fact, very changing.
Yeah. It's always moving and transforming, isn't it?
Right. So I have affinity with the technique, big sculptor of the former century, Giacometti, used. And he was in a, if we can say, I can say this, sort of magister, a sort of a master, more than teacher for me. I was many years preoccupied with his way of being, way of creation, and he became the main character of my chamber opera. So Giacometti remodelated a sort of model, a sort of figure, of silhouette, as probably most of you know. And so I felt myself very close to this, not being satisfied with when I finished a piece. And as I felt this material can produce, when I speak very pragmatical, something again. And so it's like the notes come from varying older materials. But what interests me is what I take, right, and how I'm doing. And for example, this piece, if we just make it like an example, was written for 6 voices. So, here I have 4 characters, so I transformed the material. And there is already a time that passed between that moment and this moment. So it interests me, my own attitude against the same, against a piece which I thought is finished. Yeah. So this is also the technique of palimpsest, to write over an older piece. And this interests me.
This is something Wolfgang Riem does, isn't it?
No, but I have connections with the German School of Composition because I studied there, and there is a period in my biography or in my work when every note came from somewhere, and now I feel more relaxed about the generation of the material. This maybe it comes with time or experience or the evolving of everyone, each one evolved. I think it's not like not being able. I was very able, and I had extremely complex geometries, and I know someone, a musicologist, wrote a paper on a piece of mine from the 90s, and it was like this, and there were plenty, because it was there, very, very hard working on the material, and it was a good music, in fact. But when you hear the music, you don't really think of the material. No. And this is what I want. My music should have something which is maybe confusing. Is this music very well structured, very constructed, or is free?
Right.
Is it an answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask the rest of you the same question? How do you start a piece? Where do the notes come from? What's the first thing you do when you sit down to write this piece? The most difficult part, isn't it, getting started?
For my case, it was the notes was already there in the Messiah piece. That's where I started.
In the Messiah, so the notes were already there.
Mm. So I found some a piece like this, the Messiah piece, there's so many things about it to consider. And one of the processes you have as an artist or a composer, when you work over a long period of time, one of the things you do is to find out what kind of composer you want to be, or what kind of composer you don't want to be. So of course there's lots of things I really admire.
What sort of composer do you want to be?
We'll see in a couple of years. So,
what sort of composer don't you want to be? Might be a better answer.
And it's on the way.
Right.
One thing I don't want to be is to be too strict in my choices. I'd like them to try to have an open mind every time I start composing something, and to see what this piece is really about. Inspiration comes from God knows where, and that's something authentic. And my job is to find out what is this kind of material.
Yeah.
And in the Messiah piece, I had to find out what in this piece of music is I don't want to use, or I don't admire. In many ways, I think for me, Messiah is a bit too slow and kind of stand still. I like progression, and I like some dramatic and rapid changes.
Momentum.
When something I do like is this kind of very clear harmonic language. So for the first movement that you heard here is based on 3 or 4 harmonies from the 5th movement and the first 6 or 7 notes in the cello. And I took these notes and started to create new harmonic material with them, displaying them in different ways in piano, different voicings, and then applied some techniques that I always use on my own harmonies to see, okay, what's behind them. So I try to make a kind of shadowing or mirroring messages.
Does the piece slowly reveal itself to you as you're going through all these sort of processes and sort of technical ways of starting to write the music? Do you sort of start not having a very clear idea of where the music's going, or do you plan before you start and know what's going to happen?
That depends from piece to piece. I also work a lot with music for theatre, and you have to be flexible.
Yeah.
Or you always will be struggling with the other people you work with. And every piece has its own nature. Some pieces I plan really to microscopic level, but at some point I have to see if I'm doing the piece right or not.
Was this piece microscopically planned, or was it one that you...
It was not microscopic at all.
Macroscopically planned?
Maybe microscopic. The material gave me something, and also led the piece in this way.
And may I ask, because I like so much the idea of your going to Ravel, and because it's such a famous piano piece, and so dramatic in its own way. I mean, how did you jump from Pollock and Roscoe to Ravel to the Gibet? And I mean, did it have anything to do with the first movement of the piece, or nothing at all, or did it just happen that you thought of Ravel's?
He's French. I think it has something to do with you being French.
But did you think, oh no, who I can take as a model from? Or isn't there substance in choosing particularly this piece? I mean, it is really poetical. We didn't hear it today, but that ending, and the effects that you create there, and you say that Messiaen is slow, but I think your Schubert is even slower than Messiaen.
Even more transparent, maybe.
Well, but you keep the tension, and you keep somehow on one single note. The listener listening intently. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a virtue to be able to write something like that and keep the interest of someone's ear.
Thank you.
Because Rothko is a kind of exercise in minimalism of a kind, isn't it?
Of course.
Does your reflection of Rothko reflect his simplicity?
The last period of Rothko, we notice squares in different colors. It's pure form and pure color. And what is for me is the link from Ravel and Messiaen and Rothko is the use of color. It's very much strong and clear, and also melancholic kind of colors.
Yeah.
So that's one of the links, and also the poeticism.
But I was wondering whether the melancholy of Rothko and the melancholy of Le Gibet was a connection. Not having heard of it.
Well, you see, I still don't know how Le Gibet came into it. I mean, I was delighted to see this piece.
Well, I am a piano player, so I've been working through all of Robert's pieces, and I admire
Well, you could have
admire
chosen
them for years.
Starbo, you know.
No, it just has something to do with my own temperament, maybe. This poetic side of Ravel, and also Messiaen is doing something to me. It's awakening something in my ears.
Yeah, no, I think it was a great asset.
And also it was fascinating for me to try, because this piece is something, a couple of piano pieces that for me are pieces I'll never get rid of. And the Schubert is one of them. The other is the second Beethoven and Moonchimes and stuff like that. How it's very, in many ways, simple compositions. And the way they are simple in mind that wakes so many things coming from. So when I was finished with the Messiaen movement, what happens if I take the same way of thinking to a totally other piece, but has it links because it's French?
Well,
I think Ravel and Messiaen has the same kind of temperament in some way.
What's the difference between the simplicity of Messiaen, which you find boring, or the slowness, and the simplicity of these other?
I admire the simplicity, but I'm bored with the slowness.
But you know, it doesn't have to be slow. I mean,
You can be simple and fast. Minimalism is very simple
No,
and fast.
tempo has something, not necessarily something to do with simplicity or complexity.
It's a danger of generalising too much, I think, isn't it?
Always.
Do you compose at the piano? Because you're a pianist.
It took me almost 15 years before I dared to write for the piano. Because my fingers always got in the way when composing.
Yeah.
so what about Regime? Did you compose it at the piano?
No, I didn't. But I work with the harmonies. And I'm also a jazz piano player, and the harmonies in Schubert are in many ways contemporary to lots of jazz music nowadays. So it has some connections in language.
How closely does the instrumentation relate to the harmony? Do you think of chords and then find an orchestration for them, or are the two inseparable? Because there's a lot of the timbre is quite an important element in your piece, isn't it? I'm wondering if that's something that comes when you score out the piece, or whether that's integral to the harmony.
Again, I have to say it varies. Both of the instrumentation also what kind of piece I make. The piano gives some of the instrumentation just because of the connection of the overtones. It varies. Each piece different approaching. Some ways. I'm usually more, I always spread my harmonies out more with this.
Right.
And always this one harmony can be mirrored in so many ways and still be it's almost the same. Little slight nuance just with changing to those positions or interposing another differential tone. Something changed it but still come from the same note. Not only that was an answer, but there's so many else I'm thinking.
Salvador, where do your notes come from? When you sit down to work, how do you get your notes?
I try to first I plan my general plan.
Like a general idea for the whole piece?
Yes, and a plan in different ways. For example, related with, as I explained in the...
There's an arcus.
Yeah. Yes, to build something with something like gas or like textures. So I thought, okay, maybe this kind of textures it needs to be statical in a certain way to be able to go into the texture. So maybe my movements goes expand in the time. Yeah, maybe so. And I think maybe maybe my first minimalist piece, because I don't do that previously, but because I thought maybe it goes well with this kind of thinking.
Yeah.
And so I say, okay, maybe to go in this structure, I can use the minimalism. And the notes, as you say, it comes from this thinking through. I mean, as I say, from the white noise, that all the possibilities are possible. To I don't know, through a rhythm completely like this. On different zones in areas in this white sound, and after at the end I starting to work with the computer. So computer, how the computer can done these ideas. So I built some very simple. It's very simple. I am not very well in computers and neither in programmation of the. But I built a little 3 or 4 different little mechanism. For sure, I say okay. I can put the Messiaen's modes, for example, and I can choose in the computer the mode 1, 2, 3 of the limited transposition. Mm-hmm. So okay, I have the modes and I have the rhythms. I built for example, the Brownian movement. I could control with percentage of quantity of from 0 to 1. Right. The Brownian factor. So I could control these elements, and finally the notes come from computer.
But we can't play the notes.
That is why it's very difficult.
So when I asked you, I think I asked you by email 2 or 3 times, did you write this in the computer? Did you? Because it was so perfect. And the thing is that, I mean, of course, you didn't hear the other movements here today. You heard only this one, which is really the most exotic. And the first movement, for example, what impressed me very much was, I mean, fascinated me, because it was not a question of impressing. It was fascinating to see that in the first movement and in the last one, in the Debussy Claude, you give the right and left hand something unbelievably difficult. I mean, I think I spent months just, it's more difficult than any Bach, than anything. You know, the hands are not used to do that kind of distances and so on. At the same time, it feels very pianistic. At the same time, and also there is not one single note which comes at the same time or is the same with the other. There is no such thing. So you think, this is fantastic. I mean, how does one do this kind of thing? You know, what kind of knowledge or brain? And it's chromaticism as well as diatonic. You know, the texture is unbelievable, and I mean, it was really fascinating.
Yeah,
it still is fascinating.
I have to say that I proceed in the opposite way, maybe for a composer, traditional composer. I mean, okay, your white paper, and you start, okay, and you write. I proceed. In opposite way, I mean, as electroacoustical manner, for example, you generate material, and with a computer you can generate many material for waste, for the garbage, for
90%.
Yeah, 90%, yes. And so I have to say that after okay, I choose the different states of this material that gives me the computer, and I say, okay, this is not good, this is not good, etc. Then after, I check note by note, for example, for the chords. Okay, it's possible. Okay, and the piano too. Yeah, I am not pianist, but I try to okay, and I changed some digital fingerings to
accommodate
to the hands.
No, but this was the extraordinary thing, that it's nothing like we are trained to play. And yet, I mean, however, it is difficult only because you cannot guess any note. Almost, you cannot guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't.
For me, what was fantastic because.
Well, for me too, as a, when I look at the score and when I see, but when you actually have to do it in practice, as I say, amazingly, it is pianistical. This is why I kept thinking, but if he did it in the computer, how is it so pianistic? So I was very intrigued about it.
But you're only generating a part of the material in the computer. You're working with the material, aren't you? You're composing them with the material the computer generates. You're letting the computer make some decisions for you, throwing up pictures. So the computer isn't putting these notes on the page. You
are. Yes, I can record the results of the computer and transform them to notes, to pitches, and then write the pitches. And as I work, for example, in extended or like rallentando, accelerando the music, so the rhythms stretch it or. The computer gave me the values of the durations.
Right.
Too. So I write. But in many cases it was the information of the computer. And after, as I say, I eliminate very many material. And for you say, for example, because this is true in previous works, I use like a little bit like Ligeti.
Yes.
For example, the clarinet in 6, the violin in 7, cellist in 4, and I want to explain maybe for Brown and Cloud. The result is very complex, but if I count my beat and I play my 7/7 in each half time. Okay, maybe it's not so complicated, but when you combine with the others, oh wow, and sometimes we are learning in the musical school that you have to learn to listen the niveau, the other musician to be together, etc. So in these cases, maybe it's a different way to perform. I mean, maybe I forget my keywords, I concentrate in my 7th, and the result, okay, I don't know. That is the case of the Brown and Cloud.
Yeah.
But it becomes difficult when it's one hand and other hand in 7 and in 5, for example.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But you also have some very charming rhythms and tunes with them, which I don't know if they are of any South American origin or very interesting syncopated rhythms, but it takes a while to discover them because the instruments play so much juxtaposed, so many different things juxtaposed. That just to hear, I mean, that's another thing that I like very much, the subtlety of this little insinuation of a rhythm, or of a color. But you have to feel it. You have to feel it, and the others have to feel it in order for it to come. Well, you just need to be aware of it. You don't need to really hear it like you'd hear a tune already, but just to be aware that something is happening there. And that, again, I like very much, and it happens in several of the movements.
Yes, and for me too, it's a surprise, but it comes like, I think in this moment, this comes, okay, we learn to serial music, chamber works, and way to compose, etc. And so it's maybe a reminiscence or of the 12 tones composing, because it liberates totally the pitches, the rhythms, and so you go on, okay, helping the computer helps, and maybe sometimes you have some coincidences. C major, okay, why not? C major or tonality, or for example, Debussy Cloud. This is okay. I would say the scale 6 tones.